Hey everybody, this is Speaking in Colour podcast and I'm your host, Below Tuisue, aka B. Identity. Probably one of life's biggest puzzles. It's forever shifting, evolving, and challenging you to find who you are in that moment in time. As an Indigenous person in this day and age, the pathway to self-discovery is riddled with expectations, conflicting viewpoints, and a world that seems to be unraveling. Today, we start at the beginning of that pathway. Here's to the journey. Okay, hello, Nisambula everyone. Naidangu ombulo marawa Elena Tuisue, and I want to welcome you to episode 3. Now, the title of this episode I have decided will be called Family Ties, and you'll see why in a minute. I have pondered about who would be a really good guest for our 3rd episode. And I'm not going to lie, this is the second time that we are recording this. For reasons that I probably won't say, only just because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but I wanted to get right down to the core of why I wanted this particular guest on the podcast. So what I will do is I will get her to introduce herself in the traditional Indigenous Fijian way, another clue, and then we will go from there with some questions that I have. And I will also explain as to why I wanted her to be on the show. So I'll hand it over.
Vinaka Mbulo, Nisa Mbulo Vinaka, Kia ora tātou, mana whenua e Aotearoa, nei rangu ko Elisapeci Samanunu Waqanivala, au taputu mai na iavo na sima, e nā tikina o Vuna, mai tawiuni, na nongo toka ko nonone, matangali busaratu. Me wakaerando kai na tangata whenua, na nongo hulu ni vanua, se waka Maori, mai maunga, e tawianga, na nongo waitui, na wasa e Vuna. O sa tikongo e Aotearoa sa voleka ni rosa volka volima katatana baki. So in English, I've just introduced myself, and I also want to honor our ancestors in the Indigenous Fijian sense, which is appropriate, and also for the tangata whenua, for us being here in Aotearoa and having lived here, being welcomed by the tangata whenua, and have enjoyed living in this beautiful land of milk and honey. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, so this amazing person has been quite prominent in my life, and it has been, I'd say, a role model to me as well. And so Andi Samanunu, or Nau as I would call her, is my mother. So she is joining us for today's episode. And the reason I wanted to get Nau on the episode today was that when I have a lot of discussions with young people that are Indigenous or that come from the Pacific, also people from around the world that are not English or that, of English descent, that's quite broad, but you know what I mean. They always speak to me about how hard it was for them to try and live up to maybe parents' expectations of them, or they would always think about the difference in generation, no matter what the age is, whether it be around my age group, whether it be younger. And so I thought, you know what, I've said this before, but every time I hear about our people, so our Pacific people, Indigenous people, talking about young people, talking about young people, talking about young people, it's very important that we have a different perspective.
It's commonly known to us as children, and Ratu is a formal way of addressing my father. What was told to me at the time I was in Mom's utero, and because he was a civil servant, he was a land agent. At the time they sent two young men to England to go and study land administration. My father was one of them, two Indigenous Fijians. And so he came back and they just divvy up Fiji in two, and one was the Western Division and one had the Northern and Eastern Division. They basically split it up so that they worked with the administration at the time, the colonial administration. And so, can you imagine? At the time I was being in my mother's utero, there was mentioned by my father's boss at the time, who were from England, that, if the child is born and it's a boy, can his Christian name be called the name that they gave?
Yeah.
And if it's a girl, can it be called Elizabeth? Or in the Fijian context, Elisapeci. Only because I think it was during the coronation of Queen Elizabeth at the time. So that might give you an idea how old I am now.
Okay. Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really.
Okay, so that was then. Can you imagine? My father, whose boss, they were talking and this happened. And so I was Christianed.
Yeah.
Elisapeci.
Elisapeci. That's awesome. So
my Christian name is Elisapeci and my Fijian name is Samanunu.
Samanunu. Okay, right, gotcha. So if you could describe your parents each, so describe them each with one or two words, how would you describe your parents? So your father first and then your mother.
My father was a very amazing, smart man.
Yeah.
But very gentle.
So very smart and gentle.
Smart and gentle.
Okay.
Very gentle spirit.
What about now?
She was beautiful. Beauty from my mother.
Oh, then that must mean me too.
Yes, she was very beautiful. And between them, they gave us the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, at every level of our growing up.
Oh, that's
Taught how to keep ourselves looking tidy, our hair to be neat, our, hygiene, personal hygiene, and be on time on certain things.
So punctuation.
Yeah, punctuality.
Punctuation.
Where did she go to school? I'm talking punctuality. She's talking punctuation.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
Sorry.
I love you still. The discipline that they instilled in us. Yeah. And I loved it because that was the first time I received Holy Communion. We had co-ed at some point. As you go up to class 8, we learned to exchange teachers from the boys' school, which was just next door.
What was the boys' school?
Boys' school was just Wairiki boys.
Oh, Wairiki boys.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we began to share. At the time, we weren't sharing. They went to their own school and we went. But at the time, we were in class 7, 8. We started sharing teachers. They would come in and do maths with us. And we would go and do maths with them. They do English with us. Because
so there'd be like some sort of exchange. Okay. What was your favorite subject in school?
I can't remember.
She can't remember, but she was good at all of them. I'm telling you right now, you're probably one of those ace students, weren't you?
No, not really. I think I was just one of those easygoing students that we had students that aced, that would just come first, second, third. At the time, we were sitting for our secondary New Zealand School's Living Certificate. It was called New Zealand School Living Certificate.
Yeah.
We had to pass really well to be able to be taken into Loreto. Mind you, they only wanted about 50 students for the first year, or maybe less. And they were scoping right around Fiji for all the Catholic girls' school. And so we were told you had to have a mark from 370 to 400. So you had to score. That's your window.
Bracket, yeah.
That's your window. You don't hit the 370, not considered for Loreto.
Damn.
Yes. So I don't know how I managed. But
No, I know exactly
through.
how you manage. She's being very, very, humble, but very intelligent. Okay.
She said it.
Yes, I did. You can quote me on that. Full stop, period. Anyway, okay, so those were your schooling years. You've described to us what it was like moving up, starting off quite young, going into primary school, middle school, and then eventually high school. So my next question on the questionnaire was that who was the greater influence on you out of your parents? And your answer was both my parents had great impact on me while growing up, though I was always curious to know more about the work my father did and his travels. So you have already briefly mentioned about what he was doing when you were quite young. What was it about your father's occupation that really intrigued you? Was it like the job itself? Were you just like, I wonder what he does every day? Or was it just the way he carried himself that made you want to know more about what he was up to?
I think by the time I became aware of the caliber of my dad, he had retired.
Right.
He had accepted the role of being back in the village. And my mother was another lady that needs to be mentioned because she had good breeding, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Her parents, my granddad, who we spent quite a lot of our younger days when we were small with him. And he used to be a ship's captain that took the Governor General at the time from island to island, the government boat. He was, and so my mother had the privilege of going with him. She was the youngest out of the two sisters.
Yeah.
So she would go with my granddad, and there was a lot of impact of that on us as well. And we were all there when he passed away. And then as we grew older, we came to the village in Tavuni, in the Vuna district. And I think my father had an important role. And without going into too much detail, a lot of things hinged on him.
Oh, okay. So a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, hinged on him. And then I started realizing he holds a very important role in this place here.
Yeah.
And, at the time, I think he started the school.
Yeah.
He founded the school in Vuna.
Wow.
And he founded the place where they would go and grade copra at the time when we grew up. And he introduced agriculture to the people of Vuna, like modeling these coconuts and different breeds of coconut. He started teaching the people there how, then he introduced cocoa, where they can get some kind of income. So he had a lot of influence.
Yeah.
And then he introduced the nursing station. Vuna had a nursing station. I think it was funded by one of the international, foreign diplomats. They were instrumental in may have been Australians. The Australian High Commission may have been influenced in that. He served in the board for the hospital. He was chair for the hospital board. He also served in the rural board. By now I'm growing up and I'm realizing that he had a very important role. And I would watch my mother pack his clothes, and she would call us or call me to go and watch how she folds his suit. You know, he lived in the village, but he's taking suit with him, you know. And I've seen his passport. He had British passport at the time. So he had a lot of important documents. So he intrigued me.
That's cool. I can see where the fascination would be, because you'd be like, wow, the difference, you know, of your surroundings and where you are compared to obviously the change that he brought, but also just these little cues, like you said, about suits being packed into a suitcase, his British passport. You're thinking, hold on a second, this is two different contrasts, but yet it's marrying quite well, you know. And he was the person that was marrying these two things together. And I think that says a lot about just how you carry yourself these days. And I'll get into that a little bit later, because we're trying to move this thing along, because we want to be able to get to know you a little bit more and your views about Indigenous knowledge. And that's going to be something that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I just want to mention about, you know, over time, I did sit with him one day and I said, I want to draw your map, because by now I was working for the airline.
Okay, yeah.
And I said, can we draw our map and just compare? Already in my childlike way, I was curious about where did he travel and where did I travel.
So you can compare.
Yeah. And we did a map.
Yeah.
And put it up on the wall somewhere. Yeah. Just to show his route when he went to England and back. Yeah. And my route when I went up to England, into Europe, and back to Fiji.
Wow. That would have been such a cool memory. Just, you know, just to see that.
Yeah, we color-coded it.
That's quite cool. That's awesome. So one more thing I wanted to ask you about your childhood and growing up is, what are some of the lessons? You've already mentioned that your mother used to call you in and say, watch me pack his suitcase. So what are other things that your parents taught you that, and I have to be very careful about how I structure the sentence, but already there are some differences compared to other families that I've obviously seen and been around. You were taught certain things, certain disciplines. So what were the other things that you remember that they taught you in terms of being disciplined?
Yes. We were taught just good manners while we live in this communal, in the Indigenous Fijian sense. Yeah. It started off with us, just as a family, that we are not to leave. When eating, we're not to leave until my father has finished eating. Yeah. And there's this other traditional thing that we do, which I don't think I go into. Yeah. The other was, my mother. My now was unique in her own ways. When it rains, that's the time we all sit down, and women would come in and help us learn how to do meke. And I was too young at the time, so I would go under a cupboard or something and hide. That's me. And they will say, and I would be lying there watching them. No. No. And then it went on, and even over Christmas, she would say, come and watch me. She loved doing roast. Can you imagine? We're living in the village, we're doing roast. She would do roast from bear, I don't know.
Right, from scratch.
And because we had a butcher about 15 minutes away from the village. It belongs to the Tat. They were Europeans. They lived on the Vuna land, but it was like estate.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were.
So he would go and get meat from there, and Mom would make it into roast, and she would teach us how to do roast. Wow. And I'd watch, and she'd bake, and she'd say, watch me, and I'll be rolling around in the house. And I said, nah. She said, what's going to happen to you when you grow big and you want to do these things? And I said, I'll buy it. So